Thank you so much. So yes, I don't know if I submitted that bio or not, but the only bio that really matters is for each one of us to try our best to see our identity in the context of our relationship with the Rebbe. And Eved Avraham Anechi is not just a title, it's, if we look deeply within, that's who we really are. And his kashrus and self-awareness and his kashrus are one and the same. And that's, I think, what every word of Chassidus comes to teach us ultimately. So I'm hoping, I'm praying that what I'm going to tell you will be in that spirit. And although I will elaborate, I pray that everything I say is consistent with the Rebbe's message. Specifically, in preparation for this event, I was looking at the Rebbe's words to this very gathering, which took place at Rosh Chodesh Sivan Tafshin Lamed Tes. It was this same event. And I want to tell you what the Rebbe said then, because the words that Rebbe said in Tafshin Lamed Tes sound very, very much like they could be said today, which comes as no surprise to us. We know that the words of tzaddikim are eternal, and especially the words of our tzaddik, our Rebbe, who is speaking to our lives and knows each and every one of us and knows what we need to hear. So I'll tell you I'm not going to give chazara of the whole sikha, but you can find it in Sichas Kodesh. It's, as I said, it was Rosh Chodesh Sivan. Today is Gimel, but in that year, Lamed Tes, Neshey Chabad met on Rosh Chodesh. And you can look at the Hanocha, but I'll convey to you one central nekuda. The Rebbe says in this sikha that the whole concept of Torah is shalom, is peace. And that the way we make peace on the biggest level, meaning for the entire world, is we start on the smallest level, the most local, the most immediate. So the Rebbe describes the matzav in the world and says, right now you look at the world and you see the Jewish people who are again like one sheep surrounded by 70 wolves, and the situation looks difficult, but we know that the world was created for Mashiach, and the world will eventually be the way it was intended to be all along, and there will be peace in the entire world. And the way to bring about peace in the entire world, in Eretz Yisrael, and for the entire world, and for all nations, is to start really, really super specific and personal and local, which means to start with the Jewish home. And the Rebbe explains, and this is why it makes perfect sense that before Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu was told specifically to speak to the women first. Kesemer leves Yankiv, speak first to the women, because the women are the ones who are going to implement the shalom of Torah in the specific, personal, immediate context of the home. And so too, the Rebbe says, that's why this meeting, as I told you in Tafshin Lamed Tes, it was Rosh Chodesh Sivan, today is Gimel Sivan, but the sentence is still true. The Rebbe says that's why it goes on. This meeting is taking place in the days of Achana to Shavuos, which is Matan Torah. And the reason we're getting the women together before Matan Torah is for the same reason we got the women together before the first Matan Torah, that if we want Torah, which is Shalom, to have an effect on the entire world, we got to start with the Jewish home. And who's going to make that happen? The Jewish women. So that's what we're doing here. We're meeting together, Jewish women, before Matan Torah, in order to bring peace to our homes and families, which by extension will bring peace to the entire world. It's a pretty good reason for gathering. Okay, so now we have to explain what that means. How do we bring shalom to our families, which by extension will bring shalom to the world? So first we have to understand what shalom is. And the Rebbe explains it in this sikha. Matan Torah, the Torah tells us, took place in Chodesh HaShlishi, in the third month. And the Gemara in Shabbos actually goes on to enumerate several threes that are connected with Matan Torah. That not only it happened in the third month, but Torah was given to a threefold nation, Kehanim, Leviim, Yisraelim. The Torah itself has three parts, Torah, Nevi'im, Ksuvim. The third day of Hagbalah preparation, through a third-born child, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the third-born child of his family. And on, there are many threes that are associated with Matan Torah. So the Rebbe explains that Shlishi is not just a number, it's a concept. It's not just a number, it's a concept. What is the concept of Shlishi? So you have one. One is when everything is simple. The last time there was world peace was when there was only Adam Rishon. Very simple to have a meeting of minds and to have a unanimous agreement when there's nothing but one. Two means now you have an opposite. You have an opposition. Now you have division. So if you have day, you have night. Black and white, left and right, up and down. And that creates conflict. Two is the source of conflict. So instead of, let's say, living in one nation, you have the people divided into left and to right, and they're in conflict with each other instead of feeling like they have a common identity. Just to give an example that I think is relevant to our times. But the source of all conflict is two. Then comes three, and three is shalom. How is three shalom? This is very important to understand. The mechanics of Shlishi as shalom is not that it causes one or two to back down from their respective positions. It doesn't erase the distinctions between one and two. What Shlishi does is it reveals a higher truth which is big enough to include opposites. And this is why Torah is a Shlishi. Torah, the quintessential truth of Torah, is brought out by the concept of Shnei Chesuvim HaMachachishim Zeh Zeh, when you have two scriptural sources which conflict, until you have a third verse that reconciles them. How does the third verse reconcile them? Not by telling either position to back down and be less of what it is. Like Tiferes. Tiferes doesn't tell Chesed to be less Chesed in order to get along with Gvura, and it doesn't tell Gvura to be less Gvura in order to get along with Chesed. Tiferes comes along and says that there's a higher vantage point from which Chesed is right and from which Gvura is right. They both are necessary. They both need each other. They both complement each other. They're not fighting anymore. They are enriching each other. So shalom is not just that we erase the problem that having two diametric opposites created, because that would just be going back to having one position. Then what's the point? What have you achieved? Nothing. Shlishi takes the oppositional forces, and without mitigating either of them, without compromising or diluting either of them, Shlishi reveals a higher truth that says, we have room for both of you. Okay, that sounds very conceptual. Sounds very philosophical. So let me give you a practical example, which the Rebbe gives in this Sikha. So as the Rebbe is explaining the concept of Shlishi at the gathering of Neshey Chabad, the Rebbe says, look at this gathering itself. Anytime you have a room full of people, you have different opinions, different stories. Everybody has their different experiences that led up to this moment that brought them here. And mitzad, what the Gemara tells us, that ein deisem shel b'nei adam shaves, no two people's minds work the same. So literally in a room full of people, you have all these different separate realities. Everybody sees the world through their lens, and for them, that's truth. So that's division, that's separateness. So what is shlishi? What is shalom? It's not that you come down and you make everybody think the same. Even if you could. Even if you could get everyone to think the same. That's not shlishi, that's not shalom, that's not Torah. Shlishi, shalom, Torah is that you take everybody as they are with their own unique vantage point without making any individual back down and be less of who he or she is. Be yourself, lean into it, be true to yourself, be true to your vantage point, and come together and find something greater than all of us that we all agree on and we can all unify behind. So the Rebbe says that's a perfect example. You have a room full of people with different vantage points and different realities, but we're all unified on a common task. And the Rebbe spoke about that in a very practical way, that we have to come from this group, from this meeting, with a commitment to practical application. So that's the higher cause that's greater than all of us, that none of us has to be less of who we are. None of us needs to tone it down to fit in and be agreeable. And you don't have to do that. Be yourself, but realize that there's something greater than all of us that is cherished by all of us. And because of that higher power, we can all come together. And that's the paradox of Shlishi. You don't have to erase individual identity. To the contrary, we can emphasize individual identity because Hashem knows what He's doing when He makes each one of us separate and different and special. But within that diversity, we can come to unity, which is greater than if we had a bunch of people who all had the exact same mind and the exact same experiences, and they agreed just because they see everything the same way automatically. So that's Shlishi. Shlishi is creating oneness without causing any one individual to have to erase what is special about themselves. This is a theme, by the way, in the Rebbe's Torah, this paradox. The Rebbe would often describe the paradox as Vayakel Pekudei. Vayakel has that word, kihila, which means collective, community. Pekudei means specific accounts, enumerating the individual items. And the fact that Vayakel and Pekudei often are mechubarim, they come together as one parsha, the Rebbe would often speak about this concept, that the ultimate of the collective is the individual, and the ultimate of the individual is the collective. It's a paradox, but Torah is a paradox. That's what Shlishi means. How can they both be true? Why isn't it either or? So, you know, there are some societies that are collectivist societies, and their emphasis is on the group, to the extent where every individual is irrelevant. The individual's greatest purpose is to give themselves over to the common good and to accomplish something for a greater goal. You find this often like in a totalitarian society where individuality is considered to be a threat. And they impose a homogeneous, uniform way of speaking, of looking. That's collectivism. Then you find other societies which are individualistic societies. The United States of America historically is a very individualistic society. It's about freedoms, personal freedoms, about my rights, my destiny to do what I was brought here to do, and nobody is going to impinge upon that. And in those societies, the emphasis is very much put on the individual, and even if the collective has to suffer. So the Rebbe brings out, not in this sikha, I want to say very clearly, but in many, many sikhas, that Torah cannot be confined to either of those two positions. Because Torah, by definition, as a shlishi, transcends those two opposites and has room for both of those opposites. So some societies are vayakel societies, some societies are pekudei societies. Torah is vayakel pekudei. The Rebbe gives an example. There's actually a michtav klali where the Rebbe explains that the first act we did as a nation, the first mitzvah that we did, was the Korban Pesach. And Korban Pesach is very interesting because when it comes to korbanos, you have a korban tzibur and you have a korban yachid. So korban tzibur is a collective community offering. It's paid for from collective funds. It's brought on behalf of the entire nation, like the tamidim every day are for a tzibur, or the musaf is for the tzibur. And then you have a korban yachid, like a person brings a chatas, so he sinned, he should bring his chatas, or he brings a taida. He survived a life-threatening situation, so he brings a Thanksgiving offering, so on and so forth. So the Rebbe brings out this very interesting concept, that the first act we did as Jews is this weird hybrid korban, which we cannot nail down as either a korban yachid or a korban tzibur. In fact, that was the issue. That's how Hillel rose to prominence. There was one year when Erev Pesach fell on Shabbos, and they didn't know what to do, because a Korban Tzibur you bring on Shabbos. A Korban Yachid, they say, come back tomorrow. So they were trying to figure out if they should bring the Korban Pesach on Shabbos, because Erev Pesach was Shabbos. And Hillel said famously the words, Im ein ani li mi li, meaning if I as an individual don't bring my own Korban Pesach, I have an individual duty to do it, so it's a Korban Yachid. Oh, so you don't bring it on Shabbos. He says, oh, hold on, but if I'm only doing it myself, like on a date no one else is doing it, mo'ani, then what am I? No, it has to be everyone doing it at the same time, so therefore it's also a Korban Tzibur, and therefore, im layachshav, if not now, meaning even when Erev Pesach falls on Shabbos, Moshe, when are you going to do it? You got to do it right now. So Hillel came and he explained that dichotomy, or that paradox, that the Korban Pesach was both a Korban Tzibur and a Korban Yachid, and says the Rebbe, that is Jewish identity. Jewish identity is this wild paradox where it's both Tzibur and Yachid at the same time. We do not have to erase one in order to give way to the other. Vayakel and Pekudei are both true, and they do not have to back down from each other. To the contrary, when you have the great unifying force, they come together and they build something greater than what either of them had alone apart from each other. So this is Shalom. Shalom means when we can come together and unite while respecting and honoring our individuality. How you like that? A good definition for Shalom? I got it from this sikha. I only printed one copy, so I can't hand it out, but Shalom is being able to unite while respecting and honoring and cherishing and encouraging, I'm adding more words, each other's individuality. So you don't have to be more like me in order to have Shalom. To the contrary, that wouldn't even be Shalom. Shalom is when we're different and yet we have something we can agree on. There's a word from the Rebbe, it's actually in Likutei Sichos, about why when we meet a Jew we say Shalom Aleichem. We should say Shalom Alecha. Lashon Yachid, we should say it in the singular, not in the plural. Even when you meet one Jew, you say aleichem, which is plural. And then it's even weirder. He responds to you, aleichem shalom, which is like the opposite. Hold on, you're starting up with me already? I just said shalom aleichem, and now you're flipping it on me. So the Rebbe said, that's the whole concept. Shalom has to be when we preserve individuality and differences. So we say shalom aleichem on the plural. Aleichem means plurality. That specifically, when is there shalom? When there is differences. And that's why specifically the one who answers the call of Shalom Aleichem will say Aleichem Shalom, because if he'll just repeat you, you'll say Shalom Aleichem and say Shalom Aleichem. No, that's not different enough. Now you're just saying what I said. You have to flip it and have to say a different formulation to show that we're really two different people with two different perspectives, and yet we're coming together in Shalom. And in fact, the Rebbe then even goes even further and says, the first guy says Shalom Aleichem because that's the Hamshachim Alamayla Lamata, where the Shalom is going down onto the Aleichem, which is the multiplicity. The second guy, when he counters back and says Aleichem Shalom, now it's Milmata Lamayla. It's coming from the multiplicity and going up to the unity, which is the ultimate goal. If Hashem wanted to make a Dira B'Tachtenim himself, he would have. In fact, he did, and then it didn't work out too well. There's a few hours that Adam and Chava could have waited not to eat from the Eitz Hadas. That didn't work out. And so since then, we've been trying to fix that. But the point is, if the Eibishter wanted to make a Dira B'Tachtenim himself, he could have, and he did, but that wasn't the point. The point was that the Dira B'Tachtenim shouldn't just be B'Tachtenim. That's not just the location, but it's Al Yidei Maaseh HaTachtenim. It's through the deeds of the Tachtenim, and that's another diuk. Why do we say Tachtenim? It's Elam Hazeh HaTachtoin, singular. Why do we say Dira B'Tachtoinim, plural? Because the nature of Elam Hazeh is ribui, is hischalkus, is division. The whole point of the physical world is that there are different places, different times, different cultures, different languages. The way to repeat the Rebbe's Sikha in one crowd is not the way to repeat the Rebbe's Sikha in another crowd, and you have to respect those differences. Know your audience, like they say. And making a Dira B'Tachtenim means know your audience, respect your audience, understand how they are different and unique and special. And don't have one speech and one way of saying that speech that you're going to give to every single crowd. Now, let's talk about that in a family. Because the Rebbe said the way we're going to make this in the entire world is we're going to start at home. And that's the reason we're giving this over to the women first, because they're going to see to it that it happens in the home. So what does that mean in very simple, practical terms? It means that in our Jewish home, the differences and individuality and the personalities of our children will not just be tolerated. They should never, chas v'sholom, gather the incorrect, absolutely incorrect impression that Yiddishkeit came to erase their individuality. They should know that Torah came here to harness what is special and great about them as individuals and give them the greatest ability to shine with that and to show the world what's special about them. So in a home, what it means is the mother's the one that sees to it that individual differences are respected and not just tolerated, but cherished. And everyone can have their own way to shine. And we're not competing with each other because there's not just one way of being, because everyone is special. Everyone was created by Hashem to be who they are. And it's really the mother who's responsible for teaching that and modeling that and creating that shalom. And then the Rebbe says in this sikha, which again I encourage you to take a look at, that we have another three. Shalom is three. So what is the three that we have? That represents peace, the higher power that contains individuality and opposites. The shalom in the home, the shlishi in the home, the Rebbe says here, is mother, father, child. Mother, father, child. So you want to see shalom in the macrocosm, in the world, which simply means in the immediate first days of Mashiach, it means it's a geopolitical difference. It means the autonomy of the Jewish people in their homeland, free to practice all mitzvahs without any interference. So that's the first change. And then obviously changes go on, and eventually there are even miraculous changes. But the very first shalom that happens when Mashiach comes is that there in the world is a respect for the role of the Jewish people, for the homeland of the Jewish people, and everyone in the world is able to respect it and to cherish it and actually appreciate it. So that's what it means to live in a world of Mashiach. But how does that happen? Like, where does that come from? That macrocosm is a reflection of a microcosm that's going on in every Jewish home. So in the Jewish home, when there's V'yakel Pekudei, when there's the collective and the individual, when personalities of children are fostered and cultivated rather than repressed, when a child knows that Torah is the greatest way to be your true self. Maybe like I was saying before when I started, that we need to understand in this generation of self-discovery, everybody wants to know who they are and they want to get in touch with their true identity. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's beautiful as long as you know what the maskana is before you begin. See, the beauty of Chassidus is that the maskana of Chassidus is always going to be the same maskana of Amunah Pshuta. So Amunah Pshuta knew the bottom line before you started learning the mimer. So why do you learn the mimer? At the end of the mimer, you're only going to come out with the same conclusion. Unto Sheshura, what's the bottom line? Eined Mulvade. We know that's always the bottom line. But Chassidus, when I say Chassidus, I mean Chassidus Chabad, is to take your mind through the process of Shakla V'Tarya, of question and answer, which is also Shlishi. Question, answer, resolution is Shlishi. Point, counterpoint, harmonization is Shlishi. Thesis, antithesis, synthesis, that's Shlishi. So Chabad comes and takes your brain through the journey where now you can come to an intellectual conclusion that Amunah Pshuta knew already, which is Eined Mulvade. But now you know it. Now even your Nefesh Bamis knows it. So self-discovery and getting in touch with yourself and finding out who you are is very good and very healthy. But it has to be done in the right way. The Frierdiker Rebbe speaks about it in a Sikha that the Rebbe Maharash told a Yid that he should start fasting. And he said, I should not eat? He said, no, not eating, that's not fasting. Thinking about yourself, a half an hour a day is called fasting. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says that this guy did it, and he had a seder of thinking about himself every day. In the end, it completely elevated him. So thinking about yourself is not a bad thing in the right context. So if you know like this, I'm not here to erase my identity. I'm not here to pretend I'm something I'm not. I'm not here to fit in just because of social pressure. No. I'm here to really boldly, courageously discover my true self and to face whatever I need to face. That's what Aveda is. Aveda is, I'm going to face myself. Whatever it is there. I'm going to look at it. I'm not going to shy away. I'm not going to cringe. I'm going to face it, and I'm going to work with it. And I'm going to go through that. And I know at the end of the process, if I'm truly honest and fearless about my process of self-discovery, and I get in touch with my true self, I'm going to find the ultimate truth. That I'm a chelek elokami mal, mamish, which means even in the body. And as Perek Beis of Tanya tells me, what does it mean that each one of us is a chelek elokami mal? When at the beginning of the Perek, he says, you're all from the same source. Then a few lines later, he says, but then there's higher neshamas, lower neshamas. And then in the end, right, question, answer, resolution, that's Shlishi. He says, the resolution is the tzaddik. That we're all the same chelek elokami mal. We're all from chokhmah ilah. Then you come down into a body and you can't see that anymore. You have higher souls, lower souls. He calls them even toenail souls. You know, the soul that's like the brain, the soul that's like the toenails. Okay, so now I lost touch with my original lofty source. Comes the tzaddik, and every single Jew is connected to the tzaddik and finds him or herself in the tzaddik. And then you come back home to your true self. You identify your own godliness by looking at the tzaddik, or probably even more accurately, by allowing the tzaddik to look at you. Because when you see yourself, even with a glimmer of how the tzaddik sees you, you see Elokus, because that's what the tzaddik sees in you. You see your own unique godliness. Ephraim Hager, Olav Shalom, when he had his first Yechidus here in 770 with the Rebbe, he came out after his 3 a.m. meeting. He didn't come from a Lubavitch background, so he wasn't really sure what the Yechidus would be. He came out and he said, they did not prepare me correctly for the Yechidus. I didn't understand what the Chassidim were telling me. He says, I went in thinking I was going to meet a great man. And I left realizing that I had met my true self. And the continuation of it is, actually the Rebbe told Ephraim Hager to be a Rebbe. Asked him, would you like to be a Rebbe? And he couldn't even answer. The Rebbe told him what a Rebbe is. He said, der erste Rebbe ist gewesen der Baal Shem Tov, und alles, was gehabt bei sich in Stub, hat weggegeben, jede Nacht verlegen sich schlafen. The Rebbe defined Rebbe. I would like to use the Rebbe's definition of Rebbe. I think that's the most reliable one, at least for me. The Rebbe said a Rebbe is one like the Baal Shem Tov who gives away everything he has on a daily basis. And then Ephraim went off and he became a businessman, diamonds, chairman of the London Diamond Bourse. So did he become a Rebbe or he didn't become a Rebbe? Of course he became a Rebbe. What do you think a Rebbe is? Somebody with a shtreimel, a Gabba follows him around and takes pidyones and has a tish, and that's a Rebbe? No, a Rebbe is like the Rebbe defined it, a selfless person who gives away whatever he's got. So Ephraim, he had the ability to make money and be a big Baal Tzedakah, and that's how he was a Rebbe. And every single Jew, man, woman, and child, in this generation, the Rebbe gives us the power to shine in a way that's unique to us, in a way of Shliach Shel Adam K'meisei, with the Rebbe's koiches, but with your personality, with your uniqueness, not to repress yourself, but to reveal yourself. And if the Eibishter gave you a certain koyach, a certain opportunity, certain connections, certain networks, certain resources, whatever it might be, that's what's unique to you. And then you look deeply into that and you realize that it's all there for one purpose, for one cause, to bring Mashiach, to perfect the world, to make the world be at peace with itself. And we start that by being at peace with our own selves. And how does each individual first learn how to be at peace with himself or herself? Don't tell me they go to therapy when they're an adult. I don't want to hear that answer. I want the Chassidish answer. How does a person learn to be at peace with himself or herself? How does a person learn to figure out who he or she really is? What are your milas? What are your chesronos? What's special about you? What's unique about you? What is it about you that the Eibishter does not have a carbon copy of? And how are you going to take all of that and shine in order to bring peace and harmony to the world? How do we learn how to do that? Well, the Chassidish answer is, and I believe that's the point of this sikha, is that we learn it from our mothers. That mothers go home and they make shalom in the home by revealing what's special about each child. And that whatever is special about you, we can all come together and collectively harness what's special about ourselves to something greater than all of us. And if Jewish mothers are raising their children that way, the Rebbe says, in concentric circles of influence emanating outward, the whole world will be that way. The world will be at peace with itself when we are at peace with ourselves. True peace, true peace. Not distraction, not self-medication. That's not peace. not ignoring inconvenient aspects of myself. That's not peace. Peace, according to Chassidus, is to know who I am, strengths, weaknesses, everything in between, and to understand how Hashem only made one of me. And that the gift that I can give back to Hashem is figuring out how to use all of that, what He gave me, how to use all of that to reveal godliness in the world. Meaning, what godliness? My godliness. My chelik elikami mal. So, it's a big job that you have to go home and get your kids to have this self-discovery. But I'm going to give you a hint. I'm going to give you a hint how to do it. So think of a person who was able to connect to every kind of individual. Can you imagine a person like that who was able to speak to every kind of person? I'm talking about the Rebbe. Somebody who could connect to everyone. I mean, this is a very pedestrian example of it, but people who would have yichidus with the Rebbe and speak about their field of expertise, whether it was the military or economics or science, everyone would say that Rebbe spoke to me as if he were a colleague who were an expert in that field, right? I'm sorry, that's a very mundane example of it, but the Rebbe could connect to everyone. The Rebbe would speak to the greatest scholars of the generation. The Rebbe would speak to children. The Rebbe would speak to people of all levels of observance. And somehow everybody felt good and safe and willing to take hadrocha. Not just willing, like, please, guide me. This is, I think people ask this question, like, was the Rebbe loving or was the Rebbe demanding? Okay, so for the Chabad house crowd, we say the Rebbe was loving. But, in our house, the Rebbe is demanding. Why is there two different Rebbes? It's one Rebbe. The Rebbe is able to be that demanding because we feel how much the Rebbe believes in us. If somebody didn't believe in me and came along and started barking at me, I wouldn't listen to him. But if somebody spends his entire life explaining in the deepest possible ways how I am a chelik elikami mal, mamash even in a body, and spending his entire life explaining the greatness of the Jewish people, which isn't just talking about certain greats of the Jewish people, but every single one of us, like I said, like it says in Perek Beis of Tanya, even the toenail Jews, once the Rebbe establishes that that's how he sees me, then yes, I will respond entirely different to the Rebbe being demanding. It's a completely different thing. So it's not two Rebbes. Somebody who believes that deeply in you, who sees that kind of potential in you, of course they're able to bring that potential out of you and to demand that you reveal that potential in yourself. So you want to go home and get each of your children to be the best version of themselves. You have a model for that. You have a model for how to be big enough to include all types, all levels, and to connect to each of them and make them feel seen and validated. And when they feel seen and validated, you can lift them up to a higher standard. You can get them to do more than they thought they were capable of doing. Of course you can. Then you can be demanding. It's a famous story. I think it needs to be retold, though, and unpacked a little bit differently, about the mechanech who showed the Rebbe his klolim of chinuch. I think there were 10 rules of education. The Rebbe said the 11th rule is there are no rules. I also saw in Igros a couple times the Rebbe said in different words that there are no klolim when it comes to people. There are no general rules when it comes to people. That's again, that idea of individuality. Everyone is different. Everyone's unique. So the story, a guy tells the Rebbe, I don't know what happened with my children. I raised them all exactly the same, and some came out well, and some not so much. And the Rebbe said, that's the problem. You raised them all the same. So what does that mean? Okay, simple meaning is chanech lenar al pi darkai. But I think there's a deeper explanation there, which is, even from your perception of the child, it's not that you're saying, well, I have this one method, which is the ideal method, but I'll adjust it to you. I'll adjust it to you. I think what it's saying, and you see the Rebbe as the ultimate example of this, is every one of us has a special mission. And we come here to this world to find out what that mission is. And when we respect what is unique about ourselves, then we will reveal our greatness. So Torah, the Shlishi, the great peacemaker, comes and aligns two things that seem to be at odds and says they're not at odds at all. Having a clear sense of self and individuality and knowing who you are is not at odds with giving your life over to a greater cause. I think the entire institution of Shlichus is the greatest example of that. When the Rebbe wanted to conquer a world, what did he do? He took individuals and he said, go out there and shine. And it should be kav delay, it should be your own sense of satisfaction. That the ultimate bittul, the ultimate getting over yourself, is going out and figuring out how you can shine in a unique way, in a unique place, under unique conditions. And again, that's v'yakel pekude, that's the paradox. So at any rate, I don't want to make this too lofty. Very, very simple, tachlis. Go home and follow the Rebbe's example. See your children as unique. Look at them with love, that not only do you tolerate their uniqueness, but you cherish their uniqueness. And then you will be able to guide them in how to express that uniqueness in a way that brings shalom to themselves, brings shalom to your home, and brings shalom to the entire world. Okay, Mashiach now.